In 1860, Elizabeth Packard kissed her children goodnight for the last time. She didn't know she wouldn't be allowed to see them again for 3 long years. The next morning, she was dragged from her home and locked away in an insane asylum. The reason? Her husband didn't like her opinions. She was too curious, too outspoken for the world she lived in. And in 19th century America, that was all it took to be declared hysterical. But here's the thing. Elizabeth, she wasn't mentally ill. She was a minister's wife who questioned religious dogma. She challenged the authority of men and insisted on her right to speak in public forums. So her husband, Theophilus, used the law to silence her. No trial, no evidence, just a man's word against a woman. And under Illinois law at the time, a husband could commit his wife to an asylum with nothing more than a doctor's note and his own word. While in the asylum, Elizabeth witnessed the brokenness of the system. Women were locked away for reading too much, for crying too often, for resisting their husband's advances. She spent 3 long years trapped inside the Illinois Hospital for the Insane, fighting every day to prove that she was sane. And in the spring of 1863, the doctors finally gave up. Officially, they claimed that she was incurably insane and needed to be released to make room for patients with hope. The truth? They were tired of her. They were tired of her campaigning to get out of there, and also her grown children were rallying for her freedom. And so Elizabeth was released. But then her husband took that as an opportunity to lock her inside their home. Fortunately, Elizabeth smuggled out a letter to a friend, and that friend appealed to Judge Charles Starr, who then demanded Theophilus to bring his wife Elizabeth before the court. And Theophilus, the husband, he defended his actions. He insisted that he had given her all the liberty compatible with her welfare and safety. But even in 19th century America, there were limits. It was legal to commit a wife to an asylum without a trial, but it was not legal to turn your home into an asylum. Judge Starr ordered a public jury trial, and Elizabeth's supporters included her friends and her neighbors, and one doctor/theologian who explained that many intellectuals in Europe shared Packard's religious beliefs, implying that Elizabeth was simply ahead of her time in 19th century Illinois. And after 7 minutes of deliberation, the jury found Packard to be sane and declared her a free woman. But her story doesn't end there. She also wrote Prisoners' Hidden Life in Sane Asylums Unveiled. Elizabeth lobbied relentlessly in state after state, and she won. In 1867, Illinois passed the first law requiring a public trial before a woman could be committed to an asylum by her husband. This was unprecedented. For the first time, women had legal protection against wrongful institutionalization. And her work didn't stop there. She was on a mission. She helped establish the National Society for the Protection of the Insane and the Prevention of Insanity, and pushed for independent psychiatric evaluations, better asylum conditions, and legal rights for those already institutionalized. She testified before Congress. She wrote over 10 books, all while being dismissed as unbalanced by the very institutions that she was reforming. And because of Elizabeth Packard, multiple states reformed their commitment laws. Her case helped spark the first conversations around women's civil liberties, bodily autonomy, and the rights of the mentally ill. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for every woman whose voice had ever been labeled crazy. And the echoes of her fight are still with us. Every time we speak out against medical gaslighting, we demand informed consent. Every time we refuse to be silenced, every time we talk to our girlfriends about our health, every time we post about it online, we are continuing her legacy. She was literally thrown into an asylum for having different thoughts. Thoughts that, if it wasn't verified by a man as having been progressive for her time, ahead for her time, landed her into an asylum. And obviously much has changed, but the echoes of 1800s policing of women's thoughts and women's bodies and women's freedom still affects us to this day. Today, women still tiptoe around the truths of their own bodies. We make jokes about our irritability, our cravings. We pretend that we're just being dramatic. We pretend that it's some magic that we need to gatekeep. But the truth is, it is just regular, normal female physiology. talking about our health, our cycles, and how our cycles affect us, that's not a weakness. That is reclamation. Elizabeth Packard didn't endure isolation or institutional harm so that we could continue censoring ourselves for the comfort of those who would rather not hear the truth, for fear that these biological observations will be used to medicalize us or legislate against us. We are so past that now. And for that reason, I will never shut up about women's hormones. Hey bestie! Welcome back to Powerhouse of the Cell, where longevity, belief, and femininity intersect to help us lead longer, healthier, and more intentional lives. On today's episode, we are talking about how women's biology and conversations around women's biology, they have been weaponized and ignored, and how the hormones, the body signals that shape our monthly rhythms have been used to diagnose, discredit, and shame us. We are diving into the dark history of hysteria, the realities of women's luteal phase, and why understanding our hormonal patterns and accepting that we do follow a pattern, it is not weakness, it is power. We'll also explore the double standard that pathologizes women's emotions, like,
oh, you're so emotional. You can't make decisions like that. You can't be a leader. If we had a woman president, we'd be at war already.
While excusing male aggression and never questioning that and accepting that as a fact. When in reality, men are also affected by their hormones. And color me shocked when I find out about the irritable male syndrome and how that is a manifestation of how men's hormones really do affect their mood and behavior. And all of this we talk about to drive home this point, that we need to be a lot more comfortable talking about our bodies, our wellness, our hormones, our health. And all this we talk about to know ourselves, accept ourselves, and embody ourselves better. Now we have a lot to cover, but before we get into it, I need you to hit the like, subscribe, and the notification bell so you never miss a Powerhouse episode. With that being said, let's get into it. Oh, my girlfriend's FaceTiming me. Hey bestie, don't hate me. I have to cancel tonight. Oh, why? I'm just not feeling cute. Like, I don't know, I just feel off, you know? And like, I just want to stay home and vibe. That's okay. We can just stay home and do stuff. You know what? We can do that. I got these nails from I Love Isla. We can like do our nails at home. I can make a little coochie board and we could do our nails. You have to try these nails. They are the most comfortable press-ons ever. And like, look at these colors. This is the Earl Grey. And this is Sunset. And I have the Ruby Cat Eye on right now. Like, look at that. If you end up liking them, you can go to iloveelishop.com and use code SPRING10 to get 10% off your order. That's iloveelishop.com. Use code SPRING10 to get 10% off your order. And yeah, but for tonight, we could use mine. And yeah, thank you for being flexible. I'm just not feeling it right now. Like, I just want to do nothing. But I want to do nothing with you. Anyway, I know you're working, so I'll catch you later. Bye. Now back to the topic. When you type luteal phase on social media, you get a bunch of videos of women showing their glow downs, examples of irrational behavior, low energy behavior, and the general sentiment is that the luteal phase is not their favorite phase. And I came across this TikTok with this caption: watching women contribute to right-wing narratives about menstrual cycles by talking about the luteal phase as if our periods turn us into irrational, unstable beasts. We've already done a big class on cycle syncing and being more in tune with your cycle as a woman, so watch it if you missed it here. But in that class, we talked about how just because some topics are commonly misunderstood and misinterpreted to serve the agenda of people seeking to discredit women and harm women, it doesn't mean that we should stop talking about these topics, especially when these topics have such a huge effect on women's lives. And honestly, like, we're done tiptoeing around no nuance Nellies. We're done tiptoeing around malicious people who bend all of these findings and observations to suit them. Just because people use the biological fact that women experience emotional and physical changes at different points in their cycle doesn't mean that we as women should stop learning about our cycles. There's still so much we don't know about the female body thanks to centuries of exclusion from scientific research. And now we're not supposed to talk about it at all? Give me a break. Who does that serve? Who does women's silence serve? When will we stop tiptoeing around people who cannot overcome their base desires? Anyway, there's tension between women wanting to create discourse on their experiences with the different points of their cycle and the inevitable misinterpretation of that discourse to serve the needs of malicious actors who will then use that discourse to reinforce backwards outdated stereotypes, painting women as unstable, overly emotional, or biologically unfit for leadership, decision making, or even autonomy over their own lives. So I totally get the OP bringing up how it's probably not useful for us women to treat our phases as these magical things that we have no control over, and how essentialist that is, basically saying that our bodies are telling us to do something and we do it as if we have no agency. So I totally get that, but multiple things can be true at the same time. That we shouldn't be extremely self-deprecating whenever we talk about how we are experiencing the different parts of our cycles, especially the luteal phase, which no one likes their luteal phase, okay? It's true that we probably shouldn't be that self-deprecating, but sometimes self-deprecating humor, especially by women, for women, is a means to create community and commiserate. So how could we fault women for wanting to create community with each other over a shared experience? But at the same time, we also shouldn't feel this need to silence ourselves just because we fear that other people are going to use our knowledge of our biology against us. Because they already do that anyway. Okay, they already do that anyway. You don't need to help them. Day in, day out, women's biology is weaponized against us.
She's too emotional to be a leader. Why are you so emotional? Like, we can't have this conversation. You need to stop being emotional.
Meanwhile, they do everything to get emotions out of you. Make it make sense. So let's get into the comments. Someone said, talking about the functions of our bodies doesn't give men ammunition. Suppressing and not discussing the reality of our hormonal functions shouldn't be normalized because we are afraid of men using it against us. Menstrual phases do significantly shift our mood. Someone else said, my issue is they need to stop talking about it like it's witchcraft. The only reason we know any of this is because of science and women advocating for themselves. Speaking of witchcraft, I am into witches right now. Like, the theme is witches. A lot of the books I'm reading is like witches. Like, what is it with women and witches? So anyway, I am of the opinion that witchcraft and whatever was called witchcraft before and whatever is called witchcraft now is simply science not yet discovered. Witchcraft is science not yet discovered. And like I said, I'm on witches right now. I finished this book called In Defense of Witches by Mona Chollet, and 100% recommend this book. You need to read it. And in the book, Chollet posits that women were actually the first healers, and they were actually very effective healers. Chollet writes, it was witches who developed an extensive understanding of bones and muscles, herbs and drugs, while physicians were still deriving their prognoses from astrology. And one of the biggest reasons why witch hunts were so prevalent was these female healers were so good at treating women, especially when they no longer wanted to bear children. They were helping women with birth control. In the real world, it is female healers who are most closely engaged in practices intended to limit births, and this is one key reason for the ferocity of the opposition they encounter. And since the powers that be, during the time of the witch hunts, felt entitled to using women's bodies to bear as many babies as possible, women having control over childbearing and childbirth, that was a big problem. They didn't want women having that power, a power that women have always had anyway, but were kept from exercising. Chollet writes, witch hunts enabled the official doctors of the period to eliminate competition from female healers despite their being broadly more competent than the doctors. And here's her take on women's antagonistic relationship with healthcare to this day. Healthcare does indeed seem to provide the main stage on which modern science's war against women has been waged. Healthcare as we know it was built upon women's physical elimination. The witch hunts first focused on female healers, as we have seen. And to this day, a lot of women still have an antagonistic relationship with healthcare. And can you blame them? I've been on both sides, as a patient, as a woman, as a female human, and also as a researcher behind the bench and as a clinical observer in a healthcare setting. And I'm Filipino American, like healthcare runs in my blood. So I know how much healthcare providers, they genuinely care about their patients and how equipped they are to help their patients. So we are going to look at this through a systemic lens, not an individual lens. Why is it that to this day, women still have an antagonistic relationship with healthcare systems and sometimes healthcare providers? Why is it that to this day, women still report feeling not being heard, feeling rushed, feeling like they received interventions that they didn't want to receive and that they felt they didn't need to receive. And that's because healthcare as we know it was not built with women in mind. It wasn't until the 90s that medical research had to include women. How can an understudied group ever be fully included in a system that didn't want to include them in the first place? For centuries, the male body was considered the default human body. Research was done on men. Clinical trials excluded women. And that's because the scientists, they didn't want their results to be messy because women's hormones always messed up their data. In a perfect study, you would have all these women at the same point in their cycle. Imagine recruiting for that study, or you could do a study where the women, they are all on different points of their cycle, but on their results, you have to know what part of the cycle they're in at that point in time. That adds a layer of complexity that you wouldn't have to do if you had an all-male subject pool. Anyway, the result of that, the added layer of complexity when studying female organisms, that has been the excuse used to exclude women from years and years of research. So it's no wonder that there is still so much to learn about the female body. So this whole notion that women should stop talking about their hormones, how they feel about during the different parts of their cycles, I don't think it's helpful because that silence contributes to a culture that doesn't think that women's bodies, women's health, women's wellness is all that important. So let's change that and talk about the luteal phase. The luteal phase is the post-ovulation pre-period stretch where a lot of women, they feel that they're off, they're irritable, they're anxious, they're tired, they're bloated, they're hungry, and they're crying at the drop of a hat. It's not this collective delusion that we all have. It's real, and it's driven by our hormones. After ovulation, you enter the luteal phase, which typically lasts around 10 to 14 days. During this time, progesterone rises, and progesterone's job is to make your uterus a cozy place in case of pregnancy, but it also affects your brain, mood, appetite, sleep, and energy levels. And progesterone has been known to interact with several neurotransmitter systems, including norepinephrine, serotonin, acetylcholine, and dopamine. These are systems that play a major role in emotional regulation, sleep, and stress response. And some common and normal luteal phase changes include mood swings or increased emotional sensitivity, bloating and fluid retention, breast tenderness, fatigue and changes in sleep patterns, increased appetite, and lower stress tolerance. Now, what's wild is that your brain actually functions differently across your cycle. And it's not a bad thing, it's just a thing. Long story short, the luteal phase and the changes that come with it have real effects on real women's bodies. So whenever women say that, oh, I feel off, I'm in my luteal phase made me do this, and it's like some unhinged thing, not saying that it is excused by your hormones, but did your hormones have a role in it? Absolutely. And we should be able to talk about that because that in itself is reclamation. Historically, women who express discomfort, pain, or emotion or imperfection, especially when these changes couldn't be explained, it was explained away as madness. And you know why? When women stop being compliant, complacent, and useful, she now needs to be institutionalized and replaced with another woman who will replace her labor and her presence, who is more compliant, more complacent, and a lot more useful. So let's talk about hysteria and how it has become the default diagnosis for women who dare to be difficult. Did you know that hysteria has its linguistic root in hyster, which is a Greek word, hystera, meaning womb? In ancient Greek medicine, the womb was not just a reproductive organ, it was a force of chaos. Physicians like Hippocrates believed in the myth of the wandering womb, a theory that suggested a woman's uterus could move freely around her body, pressing on other organs and causing symptoms ranging from anxiety to seizures to shamexual desire. This bizarre idea persisted for centuries and became the basis for diagnosing women with hysteria, a vague and ever-expanding category that encompassed any behavior deemed irrational, emotional, or disruptive. By the 19th century, hysteria had evolved into a convenient umbrella term for non-compliant women. A woman who cried too much, desired too much, spoke too freely, or resisted domestic expectations could find herself institutionalized under this diagnosis. And the treatments ranged from absurd to the violent, pelvic massages to induce hysterical paroxysm, an early euphemism for the big O, sedatives, clitoridectomies, and in some cases, hysterectomies, which is the surgical removal of the uterus. And a more recent retelling of women's hysteria is in Alasdair Gray's Poor Things. In the novel, Victoria is found drowned and is brought back to life by a mad scientist named God, who claims to have implanted a baby's brain into her adult body. And the scientist said that he did this to give Bella a blank slate so she doesn't have to remember the pain that she was trying to escape. Because apparently she jumped off the bridge to escape something. And then we find out that she was trying to escape her husband, who wanted her to undergo a clitoridectomy to cure her hysteria. And why does he say she's hysterical? It's because she finds out while heavily pregnant herself that her husband also got a maid pregnant and then abandoned her. So she's throwing her stuff out the window so the maid can sell her stuff and provide for her baby. And then the husband comes home and locks her up. And obviously she's heavily pregnant, the hormones are raging. She just found out that her husband was unfaithful to her and abandoned a pregnant woman. So obviously she's agitated, she's upset, she's lashing out. So her husband uses this excuse that she's hysterical to mutilate her with a clitoridectomy to cut off her body parts into submission. And in Sherry Tepper's The Gate to Women's Country, the main character, Stavia, she gets captured in the Holy Land, which is a religious patriarchal group where women are treated worse than cattle. And in this group, they shave the women's heads and indoctrinate them into submission. The main character, she deduces this about the head shaving. It violates the woman, doesn't it? It diminishes her. It makes her feel shame, which is what they really want. And this trend of mutilating women and cutting off body parts is a long-held tactic to force women into submission. And this is very interesting to me because if submission was natural to women, then women wouldn't need to be forced into it. There would be no need to indoctrinate women into submitting. There would be no need to mutilate them. And yeah, that's why it's very interesting to me that it takes this much to get women to submit. It's almost as if it's unnatural to us. And here's the thing though, like whenever the term hysterical is applied to women under circumstances that will send any normal feeling person into hysteria, isn't hysteria then a rational, normal response? And the lack of emotion, the lack of hysteria, which is emotionality, wouldn't that then be an irrational response to a situation that would send a normal person into emotionality/hysteria? Food for thought. And knowing all of this, it is clear to see that the medicalization, sterilization, and mutilation of women during this time was a way to keep women docile. It was a way to keep them compliant, complacent, and useful. So it was never about health, it was about control. This commenter said, literally, hate the way hysteria is just continually repackaged. And then the creator said, and this time it's by women for women. Now, I can't say that I fully agree that women talking about their luteal phase or my luteal phase made me do this, being self-deprecating like that is harming women, because I love that we are now at a point where we have the ease and the openness of being able to talk about these things. And I would say that our ability to do that is actually a sign of progress. And we won't let it be taken away from us by fear of being misunderstood or by fear of that knowledge being misused to move against us. Like, we're past that now. And I propose that we should arm women with the knowledge to combat the misuse of this information. Because while women do have mood changes and changes in physiology, changes in behavior induced by the different phases of the menstrual cycle, men are also affected by changes in their own hormone cycles. Women are not unique in the way that we respond to hormones. Because at the end of the day, we're all humans. So whenever people attack women for being too emotional because they're at whatever phase in their cycle, that they cannot make clear decisions, that they cannot be in leadership because they are so subject to the whims of their hormonal cycles, listen to this. As we talked about in our cycle syncing class, men have hormone cycles too. But instead of following the moon, the 28-day cycle, they follow the sun. They follow a 24-hour cycle, more or less. And on top of that, Men are also subject to the seasonal and situational fluctuations in hormones, especially in testosterone, which plays a major role in regulating their mood, aggression, and emotional behavior. Low testosterone in men is associated with irritability, fatigue, and depressive symptoms. Chronic stress in men increases cortisol, which suppresses testosterone and affects mood stability, similar to how progesterone and cortisol interplay during the female stress response. There's also the irritable male syndrome, which was coined by Dr. Gerald Lincoln in 2001, and it refers to a pattern of mood swings, irritability, and aggression in men linked to hormonal shifts, particularly in testosterone withdrawal. In short, men also deal with hormonal changes and are absolutely 100% affected by their hormones. And when you couple this knowledge with violent crime statistics, it becomes even more glaring. And anyway, going back to the video that we just saw about why women should stop posting about their luteal phases, that my luteal phase made me do this, and that, and basically telling women that they shouldn't be posting about that stuff, I would say that many things can be true at the same time. That women's hormones, women's biology, women's health, they're all massively under-researched. And posting self-deprecating memes about being crazy before, after, during your period, it won't get us any closer to liberation. But also being silent about our biology, our health, that also won't get us closer to liberation. And liberation here is being able to acknowledge the truth of our bodies without shame, without fear that it'll be used against us. So women talking about their cycles online and with each other, we shouldn't police women from doing that. We should actually encourage it. And I know that we all fear that by talking about it, it allows other people to twist our observations about our own bodies to justify moving against us, legislating against us, but they're doing that anyway, with or without our silence. For the longest time, we weren't able to advocate for ourselves on such a mass scale. And I am so happy seeing all the conversations, the discourse between women online, because now we're seeing that we are deeply intelligent beings navigating a system that was never designed with us in mind. And honestly, like, we are so done pretending that our bodies are too inconvenient to be taken seriously, because like I said, many truths can be true at the same time. We are complex, we are hormonal, and we're not broken, just like everybody else. And we need to create medicine, language, systems, culture that finally reflect that. That's all I have for you today. I just wanted to let you know that your power lies in you knowing yourself, accepting yourself, and embodying yourself. And remember, protect your energy. Also, go to ilovealishop.com and use code SPRING10 to get 10% off your order. That's ilovealishop.com and use code SPRING10 to get 10% off your order. Thank you so much. Bye.